Welcome to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. Juneteenth is a holiday celebrated by Americans every year on June 19th, but many of us have never heard of it. Many more have never celebrated it or even know how to celebrate Juneteenth. I am Jesse Enniss, Director of Communication for the Leadership Development Team of the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. And my co-host is Kim Ingram, the Director of Ministerial Services of the Western North Carolina Conference. And today our guests are Rev Dr Ash, Lakeysha Medlin, and Rev Bruce Handy. And they share with us how they plan to celebrate Juneteenth 2021.
Rev Dr Ash is the pastor of Snow Hill and Iola United Methodist Churches in the Smoky Mountain District and also serves as the communications coordinator for the Smoky Mountain District. Rev Ash is relatively new to Western North Carolina and to United Methodism. DeAndre, we are so glad to be talking with you today. I wanted to know, just as we got started, how did you get connected to Western North Carolina and specifically in the Smoky Mountain District?
Hey, it's good to be with you as well. My wife, Cherie, she was finishing up a PsyD program, and that took her to Western Carolina University. And that put us in Western North Carolina, our first time experiencing Western North Carolina. At the time, I had a position with the Foundation for Evangelism. I worked with great folks over there, and they happened to house the offices of the Smoky Mountain District. And that's where I met Reverend Linda Kelly. She's such a kind and discerning person. And just through conversations with her, I began to discern if this was the place for me, if my call was here, if my place of purpose was here. I was pastoring in Atlanta before we moved to Western North Carolina in a non-denominational church. And so conversations with Linda began to kind of foster new thoughts about pastoring and geography.
Well, we certainly have been glad to have you in Western North Carolina, and you have brought many gifts, not only to the Smoky Mountain District, but to the conference. So we're glad you're here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. And so now that you're here, and as Kim mentioned, you've recently been here. How have you been connecting to your community?
It's interesting. I started off at Iola in Snow Hill as supply, probably for 3 or 4 months as supply, and then I was there interim. In 18 and through 2019, and was eventually appointed in 2020. And so but all of this mostly through a pandemic. And so the normal ways of connecting to the community have not been there. And so I've had to do things, Jesse and Kim, I have to do things like phone calls, like picking up the telephone and calling church members, calling their family members, calling people in the community that I thought it'd just be neat to get to know pastors of other denominations, leaders in the communities, people who serve in the community, and just building relationship by phone. And that's certainly one way that I've been able to grow some roots in the community. I would prefer to have coffee, like with everybody, one-on-one or in a group setting, but that hasn't been possible until now. And so I've been making phone calls and getting to know people. I've done a few porch visits and just getting to know people that way.
So as we start to transition back into a space where we can do things like coffee and such, is there anything from that period that you did enjoy that you'd like to continue on, or are you just ready to get back to meeting people in person?
I am ready to get back to meeting people and sitting with people, but I developed. I did not know that I would enjoy kind of the audio, visual, the technological aspects of what we do. I'm normally not that much of a detailed person, but recording video, editing video, capturing audio and editing audio it's a new, I wouldn't call it a gift, but it's an interest of mine. And I've been putting a lot of time and effort and energy thinking about what it means to keep that aspect of what we've had to develop going forward, what it means for the future, what it means for a rural church in Western North Carolina to have a reach beyond, its demographic, its community, and what that'll mean for the churches 10, 20, 30 years from now. So it's just been really important for me to find ways to integrate that into the life of our churches.
Yeah, that really will be kind of a new sense of community. We often think about community or the people that live around us or the space around where we are. And the reach can be much greater now. And the idea of community will be on perhaps just where we live. The focus of our podcast today is on Juneteenth. And Juneteenth is one way that I think churches maybe are beginning to connect in their community and something that you are coordinating, I understand, in the Smoky Mountain area. And I wondered if we could just start by talking about what Juneteenth is. Can you give us a little bit of a history?
Yeah, I learned about Juneteenth about 20 years ago when I was first introduced to what Juneteenth was. I had some associates who were from Texas and from Louisiana, and we were working at a summer camp together, and they implemented a Juneteenth celebration for the participants there. And I had an opportunity to learn about what it was. I learned that there were pockets of folks all around the country who celebrated Juneteenth, but it celebrates the freeing of enslaved folks in Galveston, Texas on June 19th in 1865. And of course, that's a couple of years after the Emancipation Proclamation, maybe a few months after the end of the Civil War. But there was no Twitter and Instagram to get word out there, right? And we couldn't dispatch the National Guard in a matter of 24 hours as we can now. And so word finally got to those folks in Galveston, Texas, that they were free. And it just soon caught on as a regional celebration and then a national celebration that people moved from the South, and they took that tradition to different areas of the country. And this became a celebration to celebrate the freedom of enslaved people, particularly in Galveston, Texas, but of course, more broadly across the South in the United States.
So DeAndre, you mentioned that you learned about it 20 years ago, and it's something that is celebrated in different pockets of our nation. I actually learned about it a lot more recently. Mm-hmm. And so, it's one of those things that you don't learn in school.
Right.
If it's not one of those if it doesn't seem to be one of those fundamental things as a part of our nation, why do you think it's important for the United Methodists to celebrate Juneteenth?
Yeah, I think we have to rethink what those fundamental things are. There's not very much of the history that we learned that hasn't been whitewashed, so to speak, I hate to use such a crude term, but we learn through a particular lens. I remember growing up in elementary, middle, and even high school to where the Confederacy was celebrated, right? And so we learn history through a lens. And this is an important part of not just African-American history, but an important part of American history to truly know historical accounts of how Black bodies in America became free. Because when you know the truth, when you know facts, when you know like chronologically how things happen, it helps you, if you're willing and interested, to interpret the present in a different way, in a new and vibrant and more empathetic way. It has the potential to help people understand the plight of African Americans, Black folks in America in a more particular way, in a way that lends some more empathy, sympathy, understanding of what it meant for folks to be freed, not just physically, but to work towards that psychological and religious and spiritual freedom that we hope to enjoy today. And so it helps us understand who we are more clearly.
And I do think that's an important part of being the body of Christ. And if we're all part of the body of Christ together, then how do we collectively, as you say, celebrate, remember, understand, and be sure that things are different into the future? We have to learn from our past in order to be sure that our future is different. So I really appreciate that. You sharing that, DeAndre. I think that's helpful.
Thank you. And I think about what it means to do no harm. And I don't think that's just that's not a neutral stance. Sometimes to do no harm means to be active, to actively fight against something or to actively promote something. I think that's a part of doing no harm, not just standing idly by, but participating and celebrating those things that are good, those things that are noble, that are just, that are of good report, thinking about and celebrating those things and encouraging the celebration of those things.
So the community I live in, Belmont, has been celebrating Juneteenth for about, it looks like 11 years. And that's probably where I had heard of it, but have never been able to attend because Juneteenth often falls right in the middle of annual conference season. And we are often at Lake Junaluska around that time of year and engaged in annual conference. And so interestingly, you are involved in a Juneteenth celebration at Lake Junaluska in the Smoky Mountain District on June 19th. And I'm curious kind of how that came about. What are you all planning for it? Who's involved with it? What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, in November of last year, Actually, the Lake Junaluska reached out to the district office and wanted to initiate the planning of a Black Lives Matter worship service sometime in December. And we were all really excited about that. And through meeting together, I'm kind of a ready, fire, aim type of person. So I'm like, let's put it on the calendar and let's just do it. And then we'll do it better. We'll do it better the next time. But we're a group of folks in the district, and we just began to discern that we needed to take our time to build relationships, deepen relationships, to recognize who's already doing what in our community. And that Black Lives Matter service just evolved into what we now have as a Juneteenth celebration. And through that process, we were able to form a justice and reconciliation team, which I co-chair. Our first event will be the Juneteenth celebration at Lake Junaluska on June 19th. And we're excited about that because it's not just us, it's broader than just the district. We're bringing in Dr. Stephanie Han will be our keynote speaker, and there's a storyteller that we're bringing in, Novella Nemo, and we'll have a celebration. That'll be at 2:00, and at 3 p.m. we'll have a celebration. There'll be bouncy houses and or moonwalks and face painting. We'll have a DJ there, and just a time to celebrate, and we're excited about that.
So what are you hoping that folks will take away? It sounds like it's a really fun event, but so what are you hoping that folks will leave with after this event?
Well, honestly, we were shooting pretty high. The team is shooting pretty high. If I may be completely transparent, for me, I thought it was a big deal to do a Black Lives. To me, saying Black Lives Matter, I know it's more than just word, right? We have to have deep behind it. But to have Lake Junaluska, to have the Smoky Mountain District, considering where we are regionally, consider where we are geographically, and what that means politically and socially for that area, to raise a banner and to say Black Lives Matter, to me, that was a big deal. It wasn't a whole deal, but that meant a lot. I understood the courage that it took to say that, to raise that banner, what it meant to kind of put our stake in the ground and to say boldly what we believe in that area. And so I was energized by that. But we learned that we talked about what more we could accomplish. And we hope that people, first of all, are educated and made aware, and I have the opportunity to learn about not just the history of Juneteenth, but maybe even the history of racial inequities and injustices even in their area. Because a lot of times, if it goes unseen, we think that it's not there. If it's not talked about, that it's not there. And so we hope to start conversations, and we hope to give people tools to have these conversations. First of all, kind of disarm folks, right? To kind of set the stage for dialogue that's not threatening. It's going to be tough and difficult, but just to set the stage, to start conversations and give people the tools to have these kind of conversations and to say, hey, it's okay. These are conversations that we should be having. And kind of couching that in a celebratory event, I think that's a great way to introduce it.
It does sound like it'll be a good experience for everybody in the area. I wonder, as you're promoting it with the churches in the area, how are you encouraging leaders to connect their churches to it? We
kind of see our team as ever growing. And so we didn't have a tryout, and we don't have cuts, right? So we don't have just a 15-man roster. And so anybody who's interested in learning and growing and participating and contributing in just about any way is welcome to join the team, because it's about conversation. We thought that we'd model first what all this means. And so even on our weekly meetings planning Juneteenth, everyone and anyone who's interested in supporting or participating is invited to join. And you can find out more about it on the website, SmokyMountainDistrict.org. And even on Facebook, we have a page for the event, and it's called Juneteenth Freedom Celebration. You can find us there and find out more information, and even find out ways to connect. Really, send us a message on Facebook or shoot us an email. And what we're going to do is invite you to join us on the planning, invite you to join us to volunteer and get the word out about this event. And so the doors are welcome to anyone who'd like to contribute and participate.
Well, I'm certainly one of those folks who is willing and excited for the opportunity to be able to participate. My church, my worshiping community currently does not have a Juneteenth celebration. So, and I serve at a church that's very diverse. And so I'm wondering, as a leader, what advice do you have for someone like me who's willing, who would love to do a Juneteenth celebration at my church, but I'm not sure that I'm going to get 100% of those folks on board to do that this year.
I believe I'm the first African American pastor at Snow Hill and Iola. I think that's safe to say in their 100-year history. And so I really understand that reticence and understand what it means to navigate those difficult spaces, introducing new things, introducing new concepts, ideas, and initiating conversations, it can be a tough thing. It can be a tough thing to do. And so I would say to a leader like yourself and like me, it's just to educate yourself as much as possible, but understand that we won't all know it all. Like even on our call, we don't have all the answers. And so our thing was this, we're going to do something. We're going to do something. Hopefully it makes a big splash, but if not, still to God be the glory. We are kind of courageously pursuing what we believe that we're called to do. And I would say just learn a little bit about the subject and do something. It doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to be big. I mean, having a conversation with 2 or 3 leaders at your church or 2 or 3 volunteers at your church about what it could be is a start. And so just do something, even if it's something small. And what I've learned is that the people are much more excited about this than sometimes even you are, and much more willing and even equipped sometimes to do the work than even I might be.
Well, I'll tell the folks in my church that DeAndre told me to step out in faith. So.
Indeed.
Well, and it does seem to be a good time as there's increased awareness and equity and justice concerns, and as people are looking for ways to be more educated or to join with one another. It seems like it would be a shame to miss the opportunity to at least acknowledge it in some way this year. And it might be in worship on Sunday the next day, something in the prayer or something in the announcements, or, just something that kind of brings it to people's awareness or on their radar.
Absolutely. I remember doing or watching folks do double Dutch growing up. I never really good. Yeah, I remember double Dutch, right? The 2 ropes turning and you just have to find your window to jump in. And I don't think there'll ever be a window as broad as it is right now to just kind of throw your hat in the ring to say something and to do something. So I think that this is a wide open opportunity where you'll probably find less judgment and criticism in this era than you would have in previous times.
DeAndre, we really appreciate you being with us and telling us about that. I know there are a lot of people in Western North Carolina who would be close enough to join you on June 19th at Lake Junaluska or in their own communities to see what the opportunities for Juneteenth celebrations might be where they are. Thank you for joining and helping us to understand it better and to offer the invitation to participate.
Thank you so much for the conversation. Thank you for the opportunity to share. It was great to be with you.
Today, we're talking with 2 residents of Marshville, North Carolina, where they have been doing significant work on anti-racism and are involved with the Juneteenth celebration. Marshville is east of Charlotte in Union County in the URE district. Lakeysha Medlin is the leader of a diversity book club, advocate for anti-racism, local African-American historian, and community activist. Bruce Handy is the pastor of Marshville United Methodist Church. Thank you both for talking with us today.
It is an honor to be on.
Lakeysha, I understand that a group in Marshville, which has included some members of Marshville United Methodist Church, has been doing some anti-racism work for several years now. Can you tell us how that got started and what has transpired over the last few years?
Yes. In September of 2016, Pastor Cindy Lunsford, who was the pastor of Marshville United Methodist at the time, decided to do a dinner and discussion group after we had just came back from a equity and inclusive session. It was a 3-day training, and she said that she wanted to keep this going. And I said, Lakeysha, you ready to jump in? You want to do it? And I said, sure. She ran an ad in the paper, and we got maybe 25 people that committed, and we read the book, The Color of Water by James McBride. And we started with that book. The book was a 6-week discussion, and we had dinner, and it was wonderful. We had about 25 participants. But then when it's time to move to the next session, we kind of lost a lot of people, but kept a core number of maybe 8 to 10 people. And that core number has been going on for the last 5 years. We will celebrate 5 years this September.
So with that group, it sounds like that it was community organized or community based from the very, very beginning, that you really invited members of the Marshville community in from the beginning to be a part of that. Is that correct?
That is correct. But we targeted churches because we always wanted to keep this God, Christ-centered. So it is different when you're talking to someone who understands redemption, who understands forgiveness versus when you're talking to someone who does not. So we wanted to, that was the target area. We didn't close it off to anyone. Everyone was welcome. An article was actually ran in the paper, open it to everyone. But it was probably maybe 6 churches at the beginning that was kind of represented within the group. And now we're kind of down to 2.
And so you read a book together first, and you said it's been going on for 5 years. Did you read another book after that and then another book after that?
So we have read Color of Water. We have read Evicted by Matthew Desmond. We have read Chase the Lion. We have watched movies, 12 Angry Men, which is a great discussion movie. We've watched Little Boy. We've watched Crashed. We've watched Look Who's Coming to Dinner. What I loved about how this book club moved is that for 2 years, we did nothing within the community. Though we knew we wanted to be in the community, we were determined to work out our issues. We was determined to talk about our prejudices and our racism and our issues, because if not, then we would have been serving and doing community service in vain, because we just would have came, read the book, left the same, and then there have been no change. So for 2 years, all we literally did was discuss, read a book, watch a movie. And I would love to tell you, and Pastor Bruce will back me in on this, that every discussion that we had was happy-go-lucky, but it was not. Some discussions we had, we were just like, I don't know if I want to talk to you anymore after this point. Some discussions we had, we shed a lot of tears. Some discussions we had, we were just like, you know what? We didn't look at it that way. We didn't see it that way. So those discussions, I do believe, brought healing within the core team so that we could be effective in the community.
And it seems like it was African-American and Caucasian people that were participating, Black and white participants in the group.
Correct.
So I can see why there could particularly be some difficulty or some hard conversations that you might have as you went along.
Yes. One in particular, one of our attendees, her father was a police officer. So, when I began to talk about how I had to have the conversation with my son, that every African-American parent has to have with every Black male, at first they just could not understand it. They couldn't understand the dynamics or the issues that was going on between African-Americans and police officers. But it was after I explained to her and, really poured out my heart, how as a mother, I think I drugged my feet to get his license. I was scared, I couldn't control him once he left, but once she heard that story, could hear it from a mother's perspective, it did not because I think she was trying to be maybe defensive, right? Like, you're attacking my father. I think she then took it from you're attacking the police to, okay, wow, I now understand it from a mother, right? Not just a Black mother, but from a mother's perspective.
So I can tell that, for one, you guys have a ton of experience, not just in the good, but also in the bad. And I can also tell that you not only see it from your perspective, but you've seen this experience from the perspective of your participants as well. So as a pastor who's hoping to do some of that work at my own church, what are some of the next steps a church might take? And how would you encourage leaders to do those?
Racism is sin, right? So you have to deal with the sin issue. And the only way you can deal with sin issue is you have to confess it, right? So as pastors, and Pastor Bruce can also come back and speak to this as well, you've got to allow a safe space for people to discuss whatever that issue is, right? Most of the things that we found were traditions. Well, this is the way we've always done it. Right? Well, my grandfather didn't mean any harm, right? Oh, why can't you guys just get over it, right? And then so we had to kind of shift it and be like, just because that's the way that it has always been done, or just because your grandfather said it and you loved him does not make it right. Sin is still a sin. So we were very careful with not being accusatory, but kind of saying, okay, but do you see how that action affects someone else, right? So as a pastor, I would say create a safe place. And so your discussion may not be night one, right? It may not be the first time you're meeting, you guys get into the deep, right? You may just be jovial and, creating conversation so that people become comfortable enough to say, yeah, no, I don't like people that are named Lakeysha. And here's why.
So, Bruce, this group was going on before you were appointed to Marshville United Methodist Church, but you have been there now for 4 years. And so I wonder kind of how did you enter into the group? How did you receive what the work that was going on when you arrived at the church? And how did you feel about all that?
Thank you. I was very excited about the prospects that a church was, or at least some folks in the church, were willing to have this conversation, willing to meet together to do this work, and felt that it was certainly obviously needed and overdue. In my experience, sort of talking about issues of race, was not welcome. And so that a church that was engaging in this issue to me was, number one, very, very exciting, needed, and I looked forward to being part of it. And I wanted to support it the best I could. Felt called to be part of it. I will say, it's messy work. I think Lakeysha hinted at that. It's not easy work, but we're not called to easy things. We're called to building relationships, and building relationships is messy. We might hurt each other's feelings. We might step on each other's toes a little bit, but it's all part of the growing process. And the members of the book club, they will tell you to a person that they have been changed by being part of this group and the experience. Their lives have changed. They will tell you that to a person, I believe. And my life has changed. I have grown so much through the experience. Lakeysha, she is a force to be reckoned with. Let me tell you, her leadership and her guidance, it's inspirational is what it is. And I feel like we're sort of caught in her wake. She is leading the charge, and we're sort of caught in her wake, and it is a blessing. And I can't say enough about Lakeysha and her leadership and what she means to the group and to the community. She's doing great, great things.
As pastor, whenever you're in a group, you're a different participant, right? And considering that Lakeysha is the leader of the group, as you say, what do you see as your role in the group, and how do you feel like folks are receiving that role?
Well, I really see my role as one of support, to try to advocate for it. I try to present it to the larger congregation that this is a ministry of Marshville United Methodist Church. It's not just our ministry. It belongs really to the community, but it is a vital ministry for Marshville United Methodist Church. And I wish more people would participate, because I believe they would get a lot out of it. And certainly I think it's vital for discipleship, for our growth as disciples. This kind of work is vital. And so, but I really see that as my role as being someone who tries the best I can to support the group. And I think what is really powerful about this group is the way that it has grown and stretched after Cindy Lunsford started it. A lot of times a pastor will try to start something, and when he or she leaves, sort of that ministry might fall apart. It might not have the same momentum or the same energy to it, but just the opposite has happened. And I think that's a testament to Cindy's leadership and how she left the group, and then also how Lakeysha has sort of stepped in to fill some of that leadership vacuum. It is lay-led. I'm there just to support it, but it is lay-led. And I believe it just shows the power of the laity. And I truly believe that the church's greatest resource is our laity. And it's like I said, it's a blessing just to be able to take part in it.
Bruce, thank you for that. I think that laity really are essential for things in ministries in the church or the community to exist for the long term, especially in the United Methodist way. We come and go as clergy leaders. And so when things are really rooted in a community and with a laity, then they have more possibility of being sustainable. So we want to talk about Juneteenth and know that Marshville has a Juneteenth celebration coming up. And wondering, Lakeysha, if you could tell us a little bit about the history of that in the community and how this group maybe has gotten involved.
Well, unfortunately, in the community, it has not been that prevalent. But here's the great change. And I'm not saying that it was not prevalent within the African American community. It wasn't prevalent enough where it made an impact in the community. It has not been recognized. So in December of 2020, Monroe, which is the county seat, actually recognized Juneteenth and made it a municipal holiday. So when Monroe did that in December, Marshville followed up in January, I think it's January 5th of 2021, and made Juneteenth a municipal holiday. So another lady in the community who works in Marshville, but she functions in the Monroe community, asked the gentleman, hey, is Marshville doing anything for Juneteenth? And the gentleman said, call Lakeysha, she'll know. So she called me. She was like, Lakeysha, is Marshville doing anything? And I was like, I don't know. So I called town council. Hey, I know you guys passed it as a municipal holiday, but what are the plans? How are you guys going to celebrate it? And that town council passed me on to the Parks and Rec guy. And he said, I had not heard anything about it, but Lakeysha, you want to do something? I got you. So I text the team. I was like, guys, what do y'all think about us partnering with the town of Marshville to do the first annual Juneteenth celebration? And Pastor Bruce and everybody on the text message was like, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. So that is kind of how we got involved. So really for the whole Union County, this Juneteenth will be very different. Now, there's been different one-offs of celebrations here and there, but the whole entire county is celebrating Juneteenth. So for Beyond the Books, who's been doing the work of anti-racism, who's been doing the work of reconciliation, we named ourselves Beyond the Books because we didn't want to just stay there. We wanted to be in the community. We've been working for this opportunity to serve our community in the capacity of not only celebrating a holiday, which is, an American holiday. I know we try to separate it and say it's a holiday for African Americans. It is an American holiday, just like 4th of July. It happened in America to Americans. Therefore, it is an American holiday. So for us to be a part of this is like, we are so, so excited. And we're not just investing, our knowledge and our wisdom and our time together, but we're investing our gifts and our skills, and we're putting our money towards it because we want to see this to be a success. We're excited about this. This is almost like this is Beyond the Books, baby. And we're ready to see it being birthed with the town that we function in, that we work in the community. We're excited.
Pastor Bruce, I see you nodding your head. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. No, I think it's vital. It's vital work. I think it's vital for the churches to be involved. We are going to have a booth at the festival, and we're going to hand out water. Members of the congregation have signed up to be at the booth to make sure it's there's a person there for the whole entire festival. We are partnering with another church in the community that's a largely African American church that we've been doing some joint ministry together. So we're going to be sharing this booth together as a show of unity and reconciliation. So it's very exciting. It's very exciting.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So what might be next for Beyond the Books?
I don't know. We're just trying to get through this Juneteenth. We're like all run around like chicken with our heads cut off going, is it done? Is it done? Is it done? Is it done? Lord, bring in the money. Lord, bring in the resources. But I promise you, he is, guys. Like he is wowing us even as we're putting our hand to the plow to be servants in this way. God is going, if you do that, I'll do what I do. I know it is definitely bringing BYB closer together. We kind of get together and we pause and we breathe. We go, okay. right? But we're excited about it. Pastor Bruce had just mentioned to you guys that Marshville United Methodist is partnered with the African-American church that's in the community to do a booth. We have over 35 vendors that's going to be there. We have at least 10 performers that's going to come, from dancers to singers to African drummers. And one of the things that I think that we're going to do that may not be at the other ones in Union County is we're going to recognize at least 5 of Marshville's African-American first. So we're going to recognize the first African-American fire chief and the first African-American mayor and the oldest African-American church and Marshville Elementary's first African-American principal. So we are making this a celebration and an honor to the people who in Galveston heard the news 2.5 years later. We're doing our best to say, now, we know it took a long time, right? Finally, you got the information. Let us honor you and let us honor your work and let us honor your celebration. Let us honor your prayers. Let us honor your hope by honoring the people that have done the same thing here in our community. So we are excited and ready and probably going to die the day afterwards, but hey, we're ready to do that too.
Well, I love this because what you have shown other leaders is how it can be done in a relatively short period of time and with a kind of a few phone calls and some willing spirits. I know it's not as easy as you kind of have made it sound to us today. And yet it sounds like you've just been working on this since January. And so within 6 months, you've put together a celebration that will be meaningful to the community. And so I really appreciate you sharing how it can be done. And hopefully people will have a year until next year to get it done. And they can begin their planning now to think about what it looks like in their community to do similar things. So we really appreciate you sharing that with us today.
And if I just may add one thing to me, and I do believe this goes for the rest of the Beyond the Books members, but Pastor Bruce is our spiritual covering. He does not come in as the pastor, but we still honor him as such. So we're like, Pastor Bruce. And he's probably like, I really just want to come and read and enjoy. But we literally pull on his spiritual covering. We pull on his knowledge. We pull on, to me, he is a gentle giant. He is very observant. So where I may be going, blah, 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 and he's going, how about we look at it this way? He is that balance. He is definitely an essential part of Beyond the Book. So when you asked what was his role, I wanted you to know that he is our spiritual covering. He is our balance, because he could have came to Marshville United Methodist and been like, no, I don't want this. But he did not. He jumped right in and he's been running with us ever since. So he is a vital part of Beyond the Books.
Thank you, Lakeysha. I appreciate you saying those things. I do.
So how have you been able to share this back into the community?
One opportunity that we had, Pastor Bruce and I was invited to a meeting. It was just one meeting that's supposed to have been held with the Marshville Police Department and then some community leaders. Well, the people that was there wanted to keep it going. And so Pastor Bruce was in agreement. The members of Beyond the Books was in agreement, and we met with the town of Marshville Police Department for 3 months. We had monthly meetings, trying to break down, where's the breakdown in the communication between the residents and the police department? How can we do better as residents? And then police department, how can you do better as the police that are supposed to protect and serve? And I do believe it's because we had done the work or, was doing the work and was been active in the work that we were able to give that to our community.
Well, thank you so much, Lakeysha and Pastor Bruce, for joining us today and for not only sharing so much of your experience, but also inviting all of us to journey with you into a Juneteenth celebration. And thank you so much for your time. In the show notes of the show today, we'll have many of the resources that the Beyond the Books group has used over the past 5 years. And so we invite you to check that out as well.
Well, thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Kim. It was such an honor.
I learned a lot about Juneteenth and really enjoyed those conversations. In the By Faith magazine, they talk about Juneteenth being all about freedom. And I quote, "For Black people in America, two of the most powerful images in their historical experience are the spiritual biblical event of Pentecost and the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, the trigger for what became known as Juneteenth. Both are expressions of freedom. And in that same edition, Patsy Thomas offers several other ways that people can celebrate Juneteenth. She suggests voter registration drives or making sure that funds from the $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief bill goes to marginalized communities of color. She also says that some people will celebrate Juneteenth by holding job fairs, resume writing, and interviewing skills clinics. So our brothers and sisters who are trapped in a vicious cycle of poverty can rise above low-paying jobs with little to no benefits. And then finally, she suggests that another way to celebrate Juneteenth could be by pushing the United States Senate and Congress to enact the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. Patsy Thomas concludes, African Americans have celebrated Juneteenth to remember what we've overcome, being mindful of the present and never taking our eyes off the future. As the body of Christ, it is important for all of us to pay attention to the present and to keep our eyes on the future so that we might all celebrate and be a part of this expression of freedom. Thank you for listening to this Means of Grace episode.
Thank you for listening to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. We hope you enjoy listening to these podcasts and use them as a way to stay connected to our community. Remember to subscribe to Means of Grace for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us an honest rating and a review. It helps others find this podcast. Follow the WNCC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WNCCUMC. Once again, that's at WNCCUMC. Means of Grace is produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church and Andy Go of Gojo Studios.